Okay, great. Hi, I'm Duglass Kiangs. I want to talk a little bit about just some common sense strategies for supporting girls and minorities in computer science. I'm going to sort of divide this talk up into three things. Sort of what does the research say? What strategies actually work? Because we've tried a lot of things and not everything's worked. And then we actually did a study at my old school, and I'll tell you a little bit about what the data showed for how these things worked at our school. So, but I want to just sort of start off just to give you a sense for what I'm going to cover. Basically, the 7 strategies that we came up with, or the 6 strategies that work the best, that's them. So, yeah, some people take a photo and leave, which is fine too. There are a lot of great presentations going on here. I'm going to give you more examples of each of these, but that's it in a nutshell. Those are the secrets. Positive role models, sharing examples of student success, helping to educate the adults in your community about computer science, promoting context over tools, building community so that kids don't feel isolated, and then fostering that growth mindset. Super important. So let me talk a little bit about my class. So this is my class in Honolulu. So Honolulu is pretty diverse. So you'll see that the kids are very cosmopolitan. They're very racially diverse. But this class is still mostly male. Very few females in this class. We tried a lot of things and were able to bring the numbers of girls in the class up closer to 40% before I ended up moving to the Bay Area. But one of the things that I always felt I was at a disadvantage was, I've spent much of my career researching and looking into how to engage more girls and provide more role models. But I myself am male, so I always kind of felt at a disadvantage. Like it really should be a female up here in my job teaching computer science. We only had one computer science teacher in my high school, and it was me. But what was interesting is what the research shows is that it doesn't really matter as much the person who's standing up there, whether they're male or female. What's much more significant is to what extent you reinforce positive or negative stereotypes about what a computer science person is. And so you want your role models to bring out this sense of belonging. That's somebody who I can relate to and who I can identify with. And that was a really important study that we kind of looked at. And so this idea of belonging, there are 2 components to it that we found. The first is, do I fit in? Do I fit in here? And the second is, can I do the work? Do I have what it takes to do CS50 or to do computer science? And we found that students' perception of belonging was related very closely to how they answered these 2 questions for themselves. So this first question, do I fit in? Unfortunately, popular culture today reinforces a lot of really kind of negative stereotypes about the kind of person who does computer science. Even The Big Bang Theory, which I love, it's a very funny show, but the characters are all kind of quirky, and it makes for good TV, but people don't necessarily aspire to be like these characters because they're misfits and they're flawed in all kinds of different ways. Mr. Robot, the girl who kicked the cuckoo's nest. A lot of the hackers are often these kind of quirky, kind of edgy characters. And again, The Matrix is another one, right? So imagine the messages that kids are getting. If they're thinking about, do I want to try computer science? But the messages they're getting is that the people who do computer science are hackers and misfits. In high school, that's kind of hard. So if we want to create a sense of belonging, we want the computer science classroom to feel much more like this old show called Cheers. And the tagline for Cheers was, where everybody knows your name. Right? You want to go someplace where you're always going to be welcome. For me, my community is really organized around coffee. Like, I'm totally into coffee. I love coffee in all of its different forms, and I decided I wanted to try brewing coffee. And so I ended up buying my own coffee beans and then grinding them myself, because that kind of makes the biggest difference. And then I got to the point where, if I'm going to buy the coffee, I insisted that the coffee actually have a date on the package that shows when the beans were roasted. And if it doesn't have a date, I kind of turn up my nose, and I won't get that coffee because it's not good enough for me. And then I realized, well, aside from having the beans that you grind yourself, you also need to weigh the amount of beans and then get like a pour over, and then you need to get like this gooseneck kettle so that you can slowly pour the water over the grounds, and the water has to be a certain temperature. And this is the point where my wife said, get all your coffee crap off my table because this has just gotten to be too much. And I said to her, I said, you don't understand. You don't understand. I'm on the internet. There's all these coffee people who are just like me. We speak the same language. Like, that's my community. And just as much as I knew that what makes good coffee, I knew she didn't really belong to it. And so that's kind of one way that kids get a sense of belonging. They get a sense of belonging by excluding others. And when I ask kids to come up with a t-shirt for my class, these are the kinds of t-shirts that kids decided, this is how we want to identify ourselves in computer science. Let's have some code. Because they were proud. They understood this code and very few people understood it. You know, or they came up with this other one that was a joke online. I think there are 10 types of people in this world, those who understand computer science and those who don't. And the funny thing is, you know, it's 1 0 is binary, and yeah, it's kind of funny. But the thing is, if you're wearing this shirt, what is the message that this sends to everybody else on campus who's not in your class, right? It may say to the kids, we're part of this exclusive club. We belong. But we belong because most people don't. And so we want the opposite of that. We want to build inclusivity, but not through exclusivity. So that's the challenge. We want kids to feel proud about being in computer science, but not because it's such a rarefied thing, right? So that's belonging, right? Belonging in a nutshell is making sure that kids feel like they fit in and that they're not excluded. So actually, let me do this other experiment with you. So right now, can everybody fold their hands? You just fold their hands together. Okay. And I want you to look at your hands, and I want you to see, like, is your right thumb over your left thumb, or is your left thumb over your right thumb? So people are just walking in. We're folding our hands, and I want you to notice right thumb over left, or left thumb over right. Okay, everybody see it? Okay, all right. So you have your hands clasped, so it's going to be hard to raise your hand, but I'm curious, how many people here, well, you can unclasp your hands for this. How many people have the right thumb over the left? Raise your hand. How many people have the left thumb over their right? Raise your hand. Okay, so what that means about your future success in life is absolutely nothing. This is not correlated at all, right? But what I want you to do is however you were, whether right over left, left over, I want you to fold your hands the other way. So if you were right thumb over left, I want you to fold your hands as left over right now. Okay? And just sit there for a little bit. And then like, how does that feel? Feels weird, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, it works though. I look out at you, you are all sitting there with your hands folded, but you're all vaguely uncomfortable. That's what it feels like to not belong. That's what it feels like for some of the kids in my class who don't see kids who look like them or who come from a background that's not representative of most of the kids in the school. They can do the work. They can look to all outward appearances like they're getting along and they're doing the work, but they feel vaguely uncomfortable the entire time. And I do this to remind myself that even kids who are getting top grades in my class, if I'm not doing everything I can to make them feel welcome, to make them feel like they belong, then they're really not having a great experience in the class. So that's a bit about, you know, fitting in. This is my question. How do we foster a greater sense of belonging? And so to get to those 7 points, or 6 points, the first strategy is really providing positive role models. And whether a potential role model conveys to women a sense of belonging in the field may matter more in recruiting women into computer science than the gender of the role model. This is from that same study. So whether you're a male teacher or a female teacher or non-binary, doesn't really matter. What really matters much more is how do you convey to the girls in your class this sense of belonging. So what I've done is I've tried to bring in guest speakers. So one year we had Ashley Spiker, who is a development manager at Xbox Game Studios. She's a game developer. And and she talked to the kids about programming. And what was really interesting is after she gave her presentation, one of my girls came up to me and she said, "That was so interesting, Mr. Kiang." She said, "I thought I enjoy computer science, but I knew I would never be a programmer because I always thought being a programmer meant you're just staring at a computer screen all day, and I just like dealing with people too much. I knew that wasn't for me." But Ashley said she spends most of her day in meetings. She meets with other people, she plans with other people, she has project team groups, and then she gets down to coding and she's working by herself a lot of the time, but a lot of the other time she's planning. And so she said, I had no idea that that's what it was. Now I swear I had told them this myself, but it means so much more coming from somebody who's a role model. And so that's why I try to bring in different voices. We also bring some alumna back. So this is a former student of mine. She's now developing online tools that kind of help verify. She does like risk management for insurance companies, and she talked about developing programs and how what she learned in high school kind of helped her after high school. So this was great. And again, she's such a powerful voice to give my young women about what could this look like as a career for you. Harvard did this great series of videos. It's at project5050.org. And they basically interviewed a bunch of women in computer science talking about what it's like to, unfortunately, all the work we're doing in high school and in our classrooms to make them inclusive, when women get out into the workforce, it's still very heavily male dominated. And so, but just normalizing it and understanding, these are the things that we as young women deal with, and this is how we cope with it. Just providing those extra voices, super, super powerful. And this, again, this is project5050.org. I also try to provide some videos that kind of give some information to kids about how some of this programming gets done. So this was the final group for America's Got Talent, a group called Light Balance. So what's neat about this is actually an all-male dance team. And they have all these lighted up costumes, but they were created by a female programmer named Miral Cobb. And what's great about it is, they assume that the men on the dance team were the ones that programmed the whole thing. But it actually kind of subverts some of the stereotypes that we have. And she has this very compelling video talking about what it's like to be a female programmer. And you have developed these skills that can be used in all areas of life. Art, dance, theater, music. You can use code in all of these other disciplines. And so I like to give kids this broader context of how their skills can be useful. So that strategy number one was positive role models. So the second strategy is seeing others who look like you being successful. And so for us, we do this through our course assistants. So we have a number of students who kind of came back. They've taken CS50 in a previous year, and now they're coming back to kind of help other students. And so I work with these students regularly, and they hold office hours over Zoom. So every weeknight, for at least a couple of hours every weeknight, if you need help and you're working on a CS50 problem set, you can just jump online and ask one of these kids. And again, having one of these kids tell you, oh, here's how I would solve this problem, it's much more meaningful than having an old guy like me talk about it, because they don't respect me as much. But hearing it from one of them saying, yes, commenting your code is really important, that sticks. That is meaningful to them. I have my students make little videos, so they'll make little videos about, about how to do things. But I'm also sending a pretty powerful message that you can be good at computer science and not just be one type of person. Like, it's a diverse group of students, and we're very careful about who we pick. We want to have a balance between boys and girls. We want to have a balance between athletes and math folks. We want to have somebody on that team that everybody can relate to. Yeah?
Do you pick regarding of really balancing all the people, or really by skills?
We try to pick, the most important thing for us is to pick kids that other kids will relate to. Because it doesn't do me any good if I have a kid who is consistently creating perfect code, but is incapable of explaining it to somebody who's struggling. We want kids who will be able to empathize. And so for some of our TAs, I pick them because I know they struggled a lot in the course, at least initially, and were able to figure it out. Because I want those kids to tell them, I've had some of my TAs tell other kids, look, I know this is really hard for you, but I was in your shoes a year ago, and I stuck with it, and I figured it out, and look, now I'm a TA, and I know if I can do it, I know you can do it. And that message is an incredibly powerful message, and nobody else can give them that message. I can't give them that message. But hearing it from another kid is very, very powerful. And so finding ways to involve kids who took the course and they want to come back and help out, that's very meaningful. We also have an online message board, so if kids have problems, they'll post to the online message board, and the TAs will answer it there. So they always have a way to get help, even late at night when I've gone to bed already. My students are up and they'll help each other, and sometimes students will end up helping each other. So other students who aren't even TAs will say, oh, I found, here's the answer. And so that's also a nice way to build communities, to get kids to kind of help support each other. I've also created promo videos for my kids, so I'll just go in there and kind of video them because I want kids to see what is it like in the words of other kids. And I'm very intentional about who I put in the video. I try to make it a diverse group. I try to have just as many, if not more, girls as well as boys, because the reality of the class is going to be what they see on the video. So here's a recent one that I did for my kids.
What would you tell people about taking the course?
I would say it's a really fun and enjoyable class, and I think that you learn a lot and get a lot out of the class.
What 3 words I would say? Number 1 would be fast-paced. Number 2 would be surprising. And number 3, I guess exciting. I know it's surprising Spanish family, but yeah, those would be my 3 words.
Challenging, I would say intriguing, and I'd say hard.
Gratifying, rewarding, and challenging.
Challenging, engaging, and rewarding.
Do you think you have to have a lot of experience to take this course?
I don't think you need to have a lot of experience to take this course. You don't need any skills to go in, and you'll come out with everything that you need to know.
I think I knew I knew how to do 2 things on Scratch, and that was about it.
Stressful, challenging, satisfying.
Fun and rewarding, exciting and worthwhile.
I think that the collaboration is probably the most fun. I really enjoy getting to meet new people and work with them and struggle through problem sets, and I definitely made friends that I'll keep for a long time here.
So that's CS50. We call it CS1, but CS50. But the things that we chose to highlight were things that we know are important to a large number of kids. We didn't talk about, oh, we're going to learn this language. We talked about making friends. Making friends that I'm gonna have for a long time. We talked about I didn't need to know much, computer science to take this course. These are the important messages we want to keep putting out there because that kind of gets kids to join the class. The other thing about it is we are defining computer science very specifically as problem solving. Computer science is the science of solving interesting puzzles together. And we constantly try to reinforce that you're in this, you're not in this by yourself, you're in this with a group of people. So that's kind of seeing, and even going down to the photos that we choose. We try to choose photos with girls in them to kind of get across this idea that yes, girls take CS50 and they're successful at it. So the strategy number 3 is encouragement from other adults. Now this was actually a new one for me. I was actually kind of surprised. I didn't realize until I heard from some students that girls would go into the college, into the counseling office where they choose their courses for next year. And some of the deans who had been there for years and years and years, they had this idea of computer science that was completely different from what computer science actually is. They thought it was like heavy mathematics and very theory-based. And so some young women would say, well, I'm thinking of taking environmental science or computer science, and I'm not sure which one. And they would say, oh, well, you know, I think CS is going to be really hard. So environmental science, it's the outdoors, I think you might really enjoy that. And these are adults giving them, and then so the girls were getting steered away from computer science by well-meaning adults, but they had very little idea of what we actually do in the course. And so I created flyers, and I handed the flyers out to the adults and said, if kids have questions, give them the flyer. The flyer explains what the course is. Please don't try to make up what the course is. Here's the flyer. If they have questions, they can email me. So educating the teacher, the gatekeepers at the school became really important. And so we did that. The other thing we did is we hold parent information nights. This is something that I think doesn't make a lot of, it doesn't mean as much to kids, but it seems to mean a lot to parents. This was actually an interesting article published in the Harvard Crimson. This is the popularity of the top undergraduate majors at Harvard over maybe about a 10-year period. And what's interesting is economics is still the #1 major at Harvard, but look at computer science. Look how it is now the #2 most popular major at Harvard, and I think it's that way at just about every university now. The other thing is this was a study, a US study in the New York Times, but this, in the United States, the blue represents a number of graduates with those degrees, and the pink represents the job openings. And these are STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. The only one that has more openings than there are qualified candidates is computer science. And all the other ones, even if you're graduating with an engineering degree now, there are maybe 3 times as many candidates as there are jobs. So this is very compelling, I think, certainly for parents about the importance of computer science. NCWIT is the National Center for Women in Information Technology. This is just a wonderful resource for people who are working with young women in computer science and STEM. They have a great toolkit on how to get other people on board, how to engage the gatekeepers in your school. I've also done some work with MIT and their Teaching Systems Lab, and they study unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is a real thing. And it's related to different expectations of what girls and boys are often able to do. And sometimes it even comes in the form of overpraise. So we have observed teachers, you have a boy and a girl who complete the same task. And for the boy, the teachers will say, wow, you did a great job there. I wonder what would happen if you tweaked some of these variables and changed these things. Go off and see what would happen. And a girl who completes the same task, they go, oh my God, that's amazing. You did a wonderful job. You should be proud of yourself, and I am so proud of you as well. And when we interview those teachers and we say, was there bias in those responses? It's funny, the teachers will say, I'm not seeing where there was any bias there because I praised both kids. I gave praise to both of them. How am I biased there? And so it's interesting that it's unconscious bias because it's unconscious. But what we did find is that teachers who are unable to see bias in themselves, they can often identify it in others. And so Teaching Systems Lab creates a number of games and simulations that allow you to explore bias. And I'll share these slides out at the end too. So they created this thing called Teacher Moments. And Teacher Moments is a number of simulations that allow you to practice observing scenarios where bias might exist and talk about their reactions in those situations. Swipe Right for CS is another one where we are giving you these different situations. It's developed with code.org, and so it's based on research showing what types of arguments are most and least effective in convincing other people to try computer science. And so that's kind of a fun site to explore. This site is also really interesting. It's at implicit.harvard.edu, and this is a site that allows you to test your own implicit bias. Like, are you biased in terms of how you perceive minority students against white students, or males and females? And this is actually a little activity. It's a part of a research project. You can go through, it takes about 10 minutes, and see whether you are, what the nature of your bias is. So this is definitely instructive to look at. So strategy number 4 is context over tools. So when I first started teaching computer science at my current school, you know, we had an Intro to JavaScript course, and the course description looked like this. And if you read that course description from the lens of, does this course sound like a beginner would be welcome in this course? It's an intro course, right? I mean, if you think about it, this is kind of like if you had an introduction to Japanese course where the description was written in Japanese, right? Like, who is this really for? This doesn't really help me. So, so what we did is we went back to this and we changed it to provide some context. Why are we learning this skill? We didn't change the syllabus, and we're actually still teaching the same thing, but instead of leading with this idea of it's an introduction to JavaScript, well, we're doing it to build a website that meets people's needs. Here are some previous projects that we've done. We actually left the language out of it. And what was interesting, it was based on research that we looked at that shows that girls are much more interested in context, and boys are interested in tools. So boys will look at a, you know, introduction to Java, and they'll take the course so that they can learn Java. And once they know Java, then they'll be like, okay, great, I know Java, what can I do with it? Whereas with girls, they want to know what's the application of these skills. And when they find out, I need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they're like, no problem. And they are just as capable of learning those skills as boys are. But they want to know the context and how it's going to be applied first. That's what the research showed. But the big surprise to us, though, you'll find this even more interesting, is when we changed this, not only did we get more girls signing up, we also got more boys signing up too. It turns out there's a number of boys who are not captivated by the tools approach, and they also want to know what the context is. So we got more kids signing up in general when we changed it. We also tried to bring in different guest speakers to talk about how might these tools actually be used in real life. So CS50 David Malin, he actually came to my school and kind of spoke to the kids and did a lecture. And notice how we promoted it. We said, how can computer science change the world? How can what you're doing make a difference in the world? That's the context over the tools. The other thing that we do is we really focus on entrepreneurship as a context. Like, okay, great, we're going to learn all these tools and skills. What can we do with it? How can it make the world better? And so I had a couple of girls who developed coding kits. So they wanted to teach kids how to code, but they wanted to do it using tangible objects. So they actually they created these bracelets, and they gave them out in the form of art kits. And the art kits had little lights and LEDs, and you could program them to create a little mini light show on your wrist. And they were kind of inspired by Miral Cobb's work with Illuminate. And it was a great way to get these girls interested in computer science, but they were able to inspire so many other girls to take computer science because they saw what they were doing. That provided the context for why we're learning these skills. So context over tools, important strategy. The fifth strategy is building community and collaboration. And some of the relevant research to this shows that instead of being motivated by a specific challenge, like to change the world, research suggests that when girls are interested in technology, they're really motivated by social interaction or by helping others. And so the more social we can make that class, the more we value and reward girls coming in who already have those skills. Girls tend to come in with a higher degree of social intelligence. They're actually better at working with other people and with collaborating. A lot of my top programmer boys, they're terrible at communicating to other people or working in a group, and so they shy away from that. And when my class mostly just graded their programming work, then those skills that the girls were bringing in were not being valued and they weren't being rewarded. And the girls were working hard on the programming, but I wasn't making the boys work hard on the collaboration and group work. And going back to your talk, I mean, what's the top skill is really understanding how to work, understanding yourself and understanding how to work with others. Those are crucial skills. So I had to change my curriculum to reward kids putting work into that aspect of doing the work as well. So one way that we build communication is we hold what's called Puzzle Day. So Puzzle Day is a day, it's a Saturday afternoon. We invite the entire community, anybody who's in a computer science course or anybody who's even interested in computer science, we tell them, bring your friends, and they have these paper and pencil puzzles, and we give prizes. Harvard CS50 does this as well. And we give them these really hard puzzles to solve. But again, we're calling computer science the study of solving interesting puzzles together. And so the kids just come together, and it kicks off this great time. A lot of kids say they made friends during Puzzle Day, and that caused them to sign up for computer science the next year. So it's a way of really recasting this idea of computer science as being, people tend to think it's just this isolated activity you're doing by yourself. And we're saying, no, 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 it's creative, it's collaborative, these are all things that you're doing, you'll make great friends doing it. I've held after-school clubs. So I held a club called Girls Cyber Start, which is an after-school club. I think the girls came mostly for the free food, but they ended up staying because they made friends, and then they ended up signing up for my computer science course the next year. And then Anna in the center, she ended up leading the robotics team when she was a junior and then going into her senior year. But it started with the club. They, as freshmen, had decided not to take computer science. But they would come to the club. And so sometimes you're playing the long game. But if you help girls form those social connections with each other, they'll sign up in groups for the course. Let's see. So
How old are these girls?
these girls were 14. Yeah, I started, when they were freshmen, basically. So the next strategy is this idea of a growth mindset. And the growth mindset is based off of research that was done by Carol Dweck over at Stanford University. And her idea of growth mindset was reinforced by this study, which showed that students' interpretations were very much influenced by whether they think that ability is a fixed or malleable ability. In other words, when you say, I'm a math person or I'm not a math person, that's the idea that ability is fixed. But if you think this is hard, but if I work harder at it, I'll get better at it, that's more of a growth mindset. And so we want to encourage that kind of attitude. Because, CS involves a lot of failure, right? Like even successful people fail all the time. And kids have to get good at looking at a whole screen. They go to compile it and the screen fills with red errors. And they got to try to, not freak out and say, I'm going to work hard at this and kind of figure out what these errors are and take it methodically, step by step. Here's a wonderful set of little cartoons made by a woman named Julia Evans. And this is the growth mindset in a nutshell. So this idea of how I got better at debugging. Remember that the bug is happening for a logical reason. Be confident that I can fix it. Before I used to think maybe this is too hard. But now I'm thinking, well, I've found a lot of hard bugs before. I might talk to my coworkers about it. Before when I saw the bug, I would think, oh no, it's a bug, and now I think I'm about to learn something. So these are cute. I print them out as a poster, and I kind of put them up in my classroom. Here's another one I love. She did this one, how to be a wizard programmer. Just remember to ask questions, even dumb questions. Decide that just because other people don't know something, it doesn't mean you can't figure out how to do the thing anyway. And I love the way she verbalizes this. So again, wonderful set of web tools, web comics. The other thing we do is every student who comes to CS50 gets a rubber duck. So just like this. And the idea behind the rubber duck is if you get stuck at something, you talk it out to the duck. So you explain what you're saying to the duck. And kids will say things like, okay, so I know I have this loop, and I have a nested loop, and I have the nested loop running as many times as the outer loop is. Oh, wait a second. Oh, okay, no, I think I see what I'm doing wrong. And so kids will kind of talk it out that way because articulating your thought process can help you solve the problem. And the duck is great. The duck is a great listener. The duck doesn't interrupt, and the duck doesn't judge you. So it's just great. So we give every kid a rubber duck, and we encourage them to use rubber duck debugging. This is actually a real thing. It's actually, you can look it up on the internet. It's a rubber duck. So, and I'll brag a little bit. So in 2017, actually it might have even been before that, when David Malin came out to Honolulu, I told him about the rubber ducks that we did. And Malin then said, oh, that's a great idea. So now he gives rubber ducks to all of the students at Harvard. They get these. But,
University
yeah.
in Buffalo, they also use.
Yep. Yep.
I got one.
Yes, so you know it's a thing, right?
Started from your class.
It did, yep. It's seeing the ducks spread, it's crazy. So I guess just to sort of summarize, these are the 6 big things that we do. We try to create a lot of positive role models, bring people in. It's awesome now, actually, you know, maybe the one sort of good thing that came out of the pandemic was now getting guest speakers to appear on Zoom. It's a lot easier because most people have presented on Zoom before, and so people that I would never be able to get to come to my class in person will actually present over Zoom. It's great. I've had journalists come in and present, and programmers from Twitter, although he's not at Twitter anymore. I think he left. But all kinds of different people. So sharing student successes, showing students who've had success in the class, especially students who look like the students that you want to kind of bring into your class. Creating more adult advocates. One of the things about the research, what the research shows about building resilience for girls in computer science is that hearing from somebody else that you trust saying, you should try this out. You can do this. I believe in you. That has a huge, an outsized impact in girls' ability or their willingness to kind of stick with something like computer science. And what's interesting is it doesn't even have to be someone who understands computer science. It could be a parent, it could be a dean or a counselor, just some other adult that they respect that says, hey, you should try this out, you would be great at it. I believe in you. That's a very powerful message. So adult advocates are very important. Providing context over tools, building a sense of community in your kids so that they realize that computer science is fundamentally collaborative, and then finally fostering that growth mindset. So I want to kind of wrap up by talking a little bit about this presentation, and the research that we did for the presentation ended up being the foundation for a 3-year longitudinal study at my school in Honolulu, at Punahou School. And we collected data, and what we found was that our efforts to increase belonging benefited both genders. So these are the things that we did at my school. We changed our course descriptions to emphasize context over tools. We promoted the course heavily using videos that featured female students prominently in the videos. We promoted the course using posters that featured female students. We passed out flyers. We brought in course assistants who created videos that were first-person videos. And we supported students online using Slack at that time. And the reason why we did all these things, we were specifically trying to promote this sense of belonging and show that you belong here. That was the message we were trying to give. And what happened over the course of a number of years is we started there, and the number of girls doubled, basically, in computer science. So we doubled the number of girls taking computer science at Punahou. But what's interesting is if you look at the percentage of girls, over those 6 years, the percentages stayed about the same. In fact, they actually dropped a little bit. And it was because more and more boys were taking the course. The enrollment tripled in my courses. But even more boys ended up taking the course because of that. And so what we found was that efforts to increase belonging benefited both males and females. But our goal was going to be from there to try to achieve equal 50-50 representation. And we were still working towards that when I ended up moving to Menlo School in Silicon Valley, where I am now. So, but anyway, hopefully some of this will be helpful. I will send you the links to all of the resources. But anyway, thanks for listening. I appreciate it.